Welcome guys to my latest and greatest data pack. This is Skaliber's Better Sleeping, or SBS. It's a really bad acronym, but whatever. SBS for version 1.14 of Minecraft. This is v1 of the data pack. I'm going to be helped out by my glamorous assistant Tomb May here today because the data pack is advertised obviously as being very much multiplayer friendly. I have put a lot of effort into making sure that it does work completely in a multiplayer situation, because obviously I expect people will usually be using something like this on a multiplayer server. So getting a data pack like this to work in single player mode is actually relatively easy, because you can just use a lot of universal scoreboard to judge off the time and the time that your player's been awake. But when you have multiple people, it starts to get a lot more complicated very quickly, and of course it makes things very complicated. So I'm going to be showing off today how this data pack works in a multiplayer scenario, so that you guys can see exactly how it works and how much effort I've put into making it work well. So you may remember Tomb from SMR v1. That was the old school data pack, the very first one that was released. He was in that video as well, very briefly, and he was there. So there you go. I can't really say anything how well you did, because you didn't really do anything. You were just sort of present. So thank you for being there. So yeah, so today I'm going to be reloading the data pack. That's the first thing we really need to do. And there we go. And the data pack has been installed. Now, the reason why I wanted to reload this first of all is simply because I have actually set up a certain thing that basically means that the server will basically boot up with a bunch of default options. So if I was to go scoreboard, objectives, set display, sidebar, and then skaldebug, which is the debug screen for all of the options there, you can see a number of different options. For example, time is the exact time of day. So the time currently is 7,318, and obviously going up every few seconds there. Effect cycle is not actually in use, and that is an old one, so feel free to ignore that one. I don't know why it's still there actually. It's probably because it's not a fresh world, unfortunately, but there you go. Obviously SMC Global and Nitro Creeper are part of the SMC data pack, but there we also have time warp, tick, players, first load, delay, and also sleeping. Now I'm going to be going over in quite a bit of detail how you can affect this game, this data pack to work in your favor, how it has multiple settings that you can adjust to make it really good for you, and also how it works in quite a bit of detail as well. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the value of time warp. This is the most integral part of the data pack. The main thing I wanted to achieve when I started making this data pack was give the player the ability to affect the length of the day. I see a lot of suggestions on the Minecraft Suggestions subreddit, and also just from people I know who play the game as well, saying that it should really be an option to change the duration of the daytime, because we have all these different game rules for like random tick speed and mob spawning and so many other things. Why don't we have a game rule which is to adjust the time of day? It just simply isn't a thing that we have in the game, so I've just simply added it myself. So it's pretty easy to do actually. All you really need to do is simply have it so that game rule do daylight cycle is set to false, so the day isn't advancing by itself, but the function is advancing it manually by doing time add 1 every so often. So in this case, the value of time warp, which is currently 9, that is actually a multiplier for the duration of the entire day-night cycle. So as a lot of you will know, the entire day-night cycle is actually 20 minutes, so you have 10 minutes of daytime and 10 minutes of night. Personally, I think that's not enough. I think it's ridiculous. Having to sleep every 10 minutes, especially in early game, is very annoying. So having the ability to make that last a bit longer is much better. So if your value for time warp is set to 1, it will be the default value for Minecraft. You will have 10-minute day, 10-minute night, and every time you increase that, it's going to increase the day-night cycle by that as a multiplier. So for example, right now we have time warp set to 9. That's going to mean that every 9 in-game ticks, the sky advances by 1 time. I don't really know how best to explain that, but there you go. So there is a scoreboard counting up to the value of time warp, and every time it completes counting up to time warp, it will advance the time by 1. So if I was to set time warp to a higher value, the day would take longer to advance. Right now it's set to 9, which means that the daytime is 90 minutes long, 10 times 9, and the night is 90 minutes long, 10 times 9 once again. So the entire day-night cycle goes from being 20 minutes to 3 hours. Now you can set this value to anything you want. I think it's kind of a fun fact that if you set time warp to 72, which I'm going to do right now, so I'm going to go scoreboard, players, set time warp, skaldebug to 72. This will now mean that the value of tick has to count all the way up to 72 before advancing the time by 1. And that means that your entire day-night cycle is 24 hours. So you can actually make Minecraft the same as real life by having time warp be set to 72. Now, for me personally, I only recommend having it in the area of around 9 to 20, because that kind of gives you, anywhere from around 3 hours to 6.5 hours of like an in-game day-night cycle. Anything more than that, and you sort of don't really notice that time is passing by. Anything less than that, and of course you're too close to vanilla, and the sky just looks kind of choppy because of the way that the sky updates based around a tick scoreboard. So yeah, I recommend having it at 9. The reason why we have that first load feature now is because if I was to reload the pack, you can see that time warp will actually stay the same. The way that the time warp usually works is we have a first load scoreboard, which as you can see on the right hand side of the screen, we have first load is currently set to 1. When the data pack is first enabled, first load will of course be set to 0 because that will be the default value for a newly made scoreboard. So if first load is set to 0, then the scoreboard, then the data pack will apply a bunch of random values. Those values include the value of time warp, which is of course what the sky is multiplied by, and of course game rule random tick speed, as well as creating all the different scoreboards that we have. So the player's dimension, the player's game mode, the player's health, and a few other things as well. And those are all used in different parts of the data pack at different points. So if you have already installed the pack and set up your different options such as time warp and random tick speed, then reloading your data pack to install new ones will not erase those values. It will keep them the same, and that is why we have the first load value and why that is so important to the data pack as well. So moving on from that, I'm going to show you how this actually works. Obviously, it's taking quite a bit of effort to get it to work properly with multiplayer. So detecting that every player in the overworld who's in survival mode is in a bed is kind of difficult to do. So we're going to demonstrate how that works just now. So I'm going to go time set 1800, like so. And I'm also going to make sure that our scores are just set something else. So I'm going to do a score set at all awake 0. So if we were now both to sleep, which I hope we do, then you can see on the right hand side of the screen that the number of players sleeping counts up to 2, and the number of players on the server is recognized as 2. Now, if these values match, it means that the time will advance and the time will be set to 23,640. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen here, the time is set to 23,644 because now it started advancing once again. So there you go. I didn't realize how much talking there would be in this one. Do you want to take over for a minute?
I can't explain anything. You're the wizard.
You're the most unhelpful glamorous assistant I've ever had. I've never had another one, but you're the most unhelpful. And the most helpful. So,
yeah.
Now, the way this works is obviously if a player is in a different dimension or in a different game mode, the number of players that the scoreboard, that the data pack looks for will go down. So it's pretty simple. If our glamorous assistant here goes into the nether, you will see that the number of players that the game is looking for has now been reduced to 1. And if I'm to go into game mode 3, or spectator mode, then you can see that the number of players that the data pack is looking for has gone down to 0. Now, the time won't advance if both the players and sleeping are 0. It only works if players is equal to 1 and the number of sleeping is equal to 1 as well. So if you feel, are you welcome to come back to the... Oh, did you come through another different...
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
I'll just TP.
Okay, yeah, cool. Nice. That's fine. I think we have a few other nether portals in this world, so it might be a little bit inconvenient. Yeah.
There's many.
So yeah, so there are a number of features that you can actually change in this scoreboard. If I do scoreboard, objectives, set display, sidebar, Skal settings, we can see a number of other things as well. So as you can see that on the side, we have everyone sleeps 1 and sleep effects 1 as well. And that basically means that we get a number of different values applied at different times. So as I'm sure you can imagine, everyone sleeps is basically just whether or not everyone sleeps. So if everyone sleeps is set to 1, then the data pack will always look to make sure that everyone in the overworld in survival mode is sleeping before advancing the day-night cycle. If everyone sleeps is set to 0, which we can do by going function, Skaliber, better sleeping, settings, everyone sleeps, or the first option that comes up, you'll see that we hear a little sound to confirm that the command has gone through, and we'll also see a title saying that only one person needs to sleep. Now, if everyone sleeps is set to 0, it literally means that only one person needs to sleep. So if I'm to go time set 1800 and our glamorous assistant here was to get into a bed, the data pack doesn't need everyone to be sleeping, so as long as one person is, they can reset the day-night cycle. And that is literally what that setting does. If I was to activate the same function once again, it's going to set it back to 1, so everyone has to sleep. And now if we were to sleep once more, you'd see that both of us have to be in bed to pass the night. Now, the other effect that we have is sleep effects. This one's a little bit more complicated. To give the player more of like a motivation to sleep at a sensible time, I've given it I've kind of done something weird. I don't know how best to explain this. If you go to bed at a sensible time, so just as the sun's going down or very, very close after sunset, you can occasionally get some really good effects. Now, the way this works, if I go on to scoreboard, objectives, set display, sidebar, awake, me and Toon both have a value called awake. Now, this ticks up for every, remember that value that we had on the other scoreboard? If I do objectives, set display, sidebar, skaldebug, that value of time warp, which is currently set to 72, every time that value counts up, our value of awake will advance by 1. So basically, the data pack is really smart in that it can count up how long we've been awake based on how long the day-night cycle takes. So we're not going to get sleep deprivation after 20 minutes. We're going to get sleep deprivation relative to the length of the entire day-night cycle, which is obviously a much better way of doing it because it means that you guys can change the day-night cycle and all the appropriate effects will adjust automatically with it. So you only have to change one thing and it will do everything. So there you go. All of the different commands you can use will be in the description, by the way. So the main ones that you really need to know are the functions for changing the settings and also the ability to change the scoreboard of timewarp, which is literally just scoreboard, players, set, timewarp, skaldebug, and then whichever value you want. As a little fun fact as well, I believe the highest value you can have a scoreboard be is something along the lines of 2,140 something million, and at that point your entire day-night cycle would take 81,000 years, which is amazing. You can do that if you want to. Obviously we don't recommend doing that, but you can, so there you go. So anyway, back to the settings that we were talking about before. If I was to go function, Skaliber, better sleeping settings, sleep effects, you can see we get the same thing. You can turn it off, turn it on. So what we have is this scoreboard on the side here, so objectives, set display, sidebar, awake. You can see how long me and Tim have been awake for. It's going to very slowly count up. Again, based on the day-night cycle. So the larger the number for time warp, the longer it will take for our awake cycle to count up. Now, for demonstration's sake, I'm going to set that back to what it was before. So scoreboard players set time warp skaldebug to 9, and you're going to see that our value is going to count up a lot faster for awake. Now, what I've done is simply calculate exactly what time it will be when, based on the awake value. So when the sun is starting to set, your awake value will be in the area of around about 12,500. Because when we reset the daytime, we're not setting the time to 200, which is what the vanilla game does. We're saying it's 23,640 so that you get to watch a pretty sunrise when you wake up as well. So we've made it a little bit nicer when you wake up. Thank you for the boats, by the way. It's absolutely fantastic. So it basically, long story short, if you go to bed at an early time or just as the sun's going down or just after the sun goes down, then you'll get rewarded for having a good full night's sleep. And we're going to demonstrate this right here. So if I was to go to time set and then we'll just do 12,000, we're going to see that 12,000 is just about the sun going down. I'm going to advance that just slightly. So we're going to do like 13,400. If it's around about this time, this is the kind of time you'd be looking for. Now, at this point, the scoreboard for every player that's been awake for this amount of time, for awake, is going to be around about 11,600. So you do have a window of around about 2,000 ticks here with the awake scoreboard. But if you were to sleep, when the awake scoreboard is set to a good value, you'll get a few nice rewards. So we're going to try sleeping here, and we'll see what happens. And yes, your ears do not deceive you. We do get a nice little sound that gets played to confirm that we've had a good night's sleep. That sound is, of course, taken from Legend of Zelda. It's been slightly adjusted in terms of pitch and everything else. But this sound will only play when you have SCUR v3.6 or later installed. It's actually calling on a custom sound. I've never actually tried custom sound pools before, but of course we're coming up with a data pack in the very near future, which is entirely reliant on custom sound pools. So it's about time we started getting used to those and how they work. So basically, if you were to go to play sound with SCUR v3.6 or later installed, you can actually see this one called Custom Better Sleeping Awaken. And what that will do is call on a sound, which is of course located in SCUR, and you can play that to yourself. And again, that is the sound that gets played to confirm that you've had a good night's sleep. Now, if you want to have a good night's sleep, you can also get some nice positive effects. So I'm going to do effect clear at all, because I think we may have had some other ones, so I'll get rid of those for now. And we'll do the same thing again. So time set to night, and then scoreboard players set at all awake to a value which it's going to recognize. So again, if the sun was going down naturally, which we can't be bothered waiting for, but if it was, this is about what your scoreboard would be, and you get rewarded for this night's sleep. So we're going to sleep once more and see what happens. It's so pretty, I love it. And yeah, from this you will get speed for 12 minutes. I could have made that sound look better, couldn't I? You'll get speed for 12 minutes when you sleep nicely. Good job, me. So you get the speed effect for 12 minutes when you have a nice sleep, which is just more of an incentive to sleep. And also, if you're in survival mode, thank you, you will also see that we have absorption as well. So absorption for an infinite timer. Now, obviously, the issue with giving yourself absorption for an infinite timer is, of course, if you were to lose those hearts, it doesn't really matter. The absorption is going to stay because vanilla Minecraft is a bit shit, I guess. There's currently a bug in the
I'm
game.
guessing it's a bug that they just haven't fixed.
I think you're absolutely right. But then
Yeah.
again, there isn't really any reason why you'd get absorption for an infinite timer in the vanilla game, so there's no reason for them to fix it, I guess.
But it's still a bit lame, even with like the golden apples. That stays.
Oh yeah,
the
true,
effect.
because it's not even just the infinite timer, is it? It still stays with the golden apples.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Anyway, I have recently found a way to fix this. When you lose the 2 hearts that you gain from the absorption buff, you instantly have the absorption buff cleared. Toom, if you'd like to demonstrate, I'm going to just open my inventory and we're going to see that will disappear when I take some damage. You're welcome to punch me. Go for it. There you go. Okay, no. So the moment I lost the absorption hearts, you can see that the buff clears from my inventory. Now the way I've set this up is that if you get absorption from any source, you will definitely get the absorption buff, but if your absorption is drained back to 0, then the buff gets cleared. And this means that applying the player an infinite absorption buff isn't going to be a huge problem. So thank you again for this apple. You'll see we have absorption 4. We're going to lose a few hearts, a few more hearts, one more. And there we go, we lost the absorption buff instantly. So if you are going to get absorption from a golden apple or the data pack or whatever, it doesn't matter, you will always get absorption, but the moment that you lose all your absorption hearts, you will lose the buff. So it's not going to be sitting around in your inventory, even though you don't have the hearts anymore, which obviously never really made any sense. So I'm glad that we've managed to fix that quite easily. In fact, it's just a single line in the end, so it's pretty easy to do. So yeah, so again, that function that we showed before with the different settings, you can turn this off. So if I was to go function, Skaliber, better sleeping settings, sleep effects, if I set that to 0, then it will mean that if we wake up after having a good night's sleep, we won't get the absorption and the speed. So if you want to use this data pack but don't want to have your players get any positive effects from getting a good night's sleep, you can simply disable this, and at that point the awake scoreboard won't even tick up, it will just stay at 0 permanently. And that basically means that your players will not be able to get any sort of nice effects. So there you go. And that is everything we have to show. If you go in the Nether, or you're in game mode 3 or game mode 1 or whatever, then it doesn't matter. Like, you know, it will, the data pack only targets players in survival mode, which is really, really good. So yeah, it's great. It's really, really good. I'm really pleased with the way this has turned out, and I think it's really good. It's easily the best data pack I've made so far. It has the most function files and the most complexity, and I originally tried to do this about 6 months ago and just simply didn't have the knowledge to do it, but now I can, so it's really nice to see that my skills have come a long way. So it's really nice to see, you know, so it's good stuff. But yeah, future plans for this pack do include a number of things. For example, right now, phantoms don't really work properly because, of course, phantoms usually work based on how long you've not slept for. Oh, shit. I just put the bed back. I think usually, we did some research on this before, but I think it's 3 days without sleeping and you'll start to get phantoms. And then for every day you stay awake after phantoms have started spawning, they'll just start to spawn more often. But of course, they can still only spawn during night or during thunderstorms. Right now, there isn't really a workaround for this, but I am planning on doing something quite interesting with phantoms, potentially just reworking the way that they work in general, so that they may be even able to spawn in the daytime if you've not slept for the night, which would obviously be a much more big encouragement to sleep, but not as annoying as having like a debuff permanently all day. So there are a lot of plans that I have for future of this pack. There are a lot of things that I can add, and you can be sure that I'm going to make this as customizable as possible. I will always be adding different settings based on all those things as well. So yeah, so that concludes it for the pack. Do you have any further comments for me, Glamorous Assistant?
Not really.
Okay, there you go. So yeah. SBS is now available to download from my website, as are all my other data packs. And again, I would just like to clarify, that nice sound that gets played when you wake up after a good night's sleep, that will not actually work unless you have SCUR v3.6 installed. Of course, at the time this video is released, v3.6 doesn't actually exist yet, but of course it will be releasing in the next few weeks. As you know, I update Scare all the time, so there'll be a new version very, very soon. So yeah, if you like the data pack, feel free to comment below with any sort of feedback that you have, any suggestions, any ideas for future settings that I can add to the data pack. And of course, if you want to have a discussion with me about Skir or any of the existing projects that I work on, you're more than welcome to join the Discord. We've got a bunch of guys over there that are all very passionate about resource pack stuff, Toom included. So yeah, thanks for watching. I've been Skal, and this has been Toom, and we've been, you know, explaining shit. So yeah, are we done now? Is that what's finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for watching. Wait, no, I haven't. Okay. You can do the whole like, subscribe thing, because I have shame, but it's not your YouTube channel, so you can just do it.
I have shame too.
Fine. Well, Okay.
Like or I'll DDoS you. No.
Too real, bro. Fuck.
I don't know how to.
We'll fucking melt your router, okay?
Oh no.
Oh god. Okay. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the data pack. And yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.